Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. Before I get into introducing my guests, I want to take a moment to tell you I've created a Patreon. I hope you check it out and that you'll be a part of the Hey Human community I'm fostering there. I started Hey Human as a way to shine a light on the day-to-day people who are what I consider the real heroes in this world, the ones finding hope and a way to keep going in spite of whatever life has thrown at them, and to remind us all that we're connected no matter what, because I'm desperate for humanity to thrive, and I get that this planet feels lonely. I'm one of the lonely, and I'm trying to remind us all that we're more than what we present on the outside, the masks we wear, that we are more same than we are different, and that wherever there's darkness, there's a whole lot of light, working hard to chase that darkness out. There's a lot of really interesting, fascinating, lovely people out there who are going through some of the same stuff we're going through, So you can find it at patreon.com/SusanRuthism, which is SusanRuthism. I'd like the Patreon page to be one of connection. I'll host monthly check-ins, and you can ask me questions or share your own human story, and I'll share mine too, wherever I am on my journey. And thank you for being a part of this, all for nearly 8 years. I'd like to see it continue, and doing the Patreon will definitely help make that a reality. All right, right now, on with the show. This is episode 403, and my guest is Mahwish Syed. Mahwish is an award-winning fashion and interior designer specializing in creating environments that heal. She's an author of the best-selling book Purgatory to Paradise, chronicling her breast cancer journey to healing. She's a strong, engaging woman. She's got magic in her eyes. She's such a fascinating lady. I really enjoyed talking with her. She and I definitely had so much in common, and I'm excited for you to hear this episode. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests in the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. Find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. And rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love. Here we go. Mahwish Syed, welcome to Hey Human.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. Delighted.
Lovely to see you. What is this necklace you're wearing? It's beautiful.
Thank you. It's a design of mine. It's solid lapis, and it represents the divine feminine, which I have an interesting story to tell about this necklace if you're so inclined to listen.
I am.
I was asked to go back to my neck of the woods in Pakistan. It was a mission. Many organizations were involved, including the EU and the Aga Khan Foundation. And all the designers that they had enlisted to go were too afraid to go. So last minute, I got called in, and they're like, a friend of mine said, "Would you like to go over coffee?" And I'm like, yeah, I would. And so I went to meet with women from Gilgit area, the up northwestern region, and they drove 21 hours to meet with me. And I basically assessed all the machinery. Pakistan is the 5th largest exporter of semi-precious gemstones and other gemstones. And yet the people there weren't really availing themselves of their natural resources. And the designs that they had been given were far too complex for their machinery. So I walked in. Of course, they didn't expect for me to be one of them. And I assessed the machinery, I assessed what they were able to make, and I started sketching on the spot. What's crazy is I picked this design not only for the symbolism, but there's a secret about the symbol. This is, of course, everyone knows as the star and crescent of Islam, but Islam gets it from the Byzantine Empire, and it predates even that to Greek mythology, which comes full circle into what we're about to talk about, which is a part of my book about celebrating the goddess within all of us. So this idea of women empowering themselves in that part of the world, using a symbol of the divine feminine was something that I really enjoyed creating together.
I love that. I'm excited to get into all that is you. I want to start, as I start all of these episodes, tell me about you, how you grew up, what shaped you as a person.
I think one of my fondest memories was sitting on the veranda floor with my aunties, and I call them, my fairies, because I had 7 of them. I had 4 on my mom's side and 3 on my dad's side, and I grew up with 4 generations under one roof. So I learned how to be the divine feminine from them, and this idea of softness and laughter and grace and reverence, and then, of course, textiles, which is a huge part of me. I grew up sewing, and, like Sleeping Beauty, who was basically pricked by the spindle, I was actually pricked by the needle, believe it or not, in my grandmother's rotary singer. But the old cranky one. But I feel like I was initiated into a magical world, and I grew up with mythology. I grew up with folk tales and family folk tales that were passed down from generation to generation, which I also touch on in my book. So for me, that level of finding that magic in the everyday came from watching them and sitting on their fragrant laps and smelling the jasmine and the roses in my grandmother's garden. And so I feel like everywhere I go, I try to recreate that memory.
Growing up with that strong matriarchal influence and understanding the power of women within the confines of the aunties and the generational aunties and the worldwide aunties as well.
Yes.
Growing up with that understanding, was it weird to see that once you stepped outside of that protective nest, that the world did not treat women and aunties and girls in the same reverence that it did within that confine?
There is always that dichotomy. But I honestly think there's a lot of, and my mom and I talk about this too, this way she says, I have it hard twice, being a woman in the West, having to perform and be in my masculine, but also be in my feminine, to have to do both. And I think that just makes us tired, Susan.
Yeah, amen to that, sister.
It's just tiring. So, I mean, I really believe that we need both. And I talk about this also in terms of shadow and light, speaking of the divine. And in order to really own that divinity within us, we have to embrace our shadow side too. So you can't just parse it away and shove it away and be like, no, you go over there. I think embracing all those parts is the way to our divinity.
I wholeheartly agree. Did you have an understanding as a child, being surrounded by the lush colors of where you grew up, and as you mentioned, textiles and gemstones? Did you think to yourself, this is what I want to do with my life, or was that something that came a little later? And how long were you there for? Did you come to the United States as a young person?
I came here when I was 7, but we spent summers back home and have a very strong connection to my relatives. English is my second language. I grew up speaking Urdu and English, and then later French and Arabic. But I feel that level of expression I took for granted. I just thought everybody designed their clothes when they were little. I thought, because we designed everything. We had tailors to make our clothing. So I remember being in a home ec class when I was like 13 years old. And I gave my teacher heart palpitations because I started cutting without a pattern, because I was taught how to cut, using like origami, like how to be able to measure everything. And I also used to drape directly on my body. And weirdly enough, Susan, when I had my dress shop in New York, I did that. I draped directly on my clients. And, it was during that time where everyone was following, I forget that show where, can you fit into the dress? And you had to lose all this weight to fit into the dress. And I always thought that was like ass backwards because the dress should fit you. And, creating what is the definition of beauty is accepting where you're at, right? Your curves. And there is not one standard of beauty. And growing up, one of the things I must say, to be too skinny was bad. That meant like you didn't have enough money. So to be plump was the paragon of beauty and also of wealth, a sign of wealth. So I think it's so interesting culturally how that affects someone. And, coming here and seeing, for the first time, different hair colors and different eye colors and all of that was, oh my gosh, everybody from my storybooks came alive. So it was really great.
There's a video that I've seen that is fascinating to watch, and it's cultural feminine beauty standards around the world. And it shows just all the types and the looks and all this. And it's so interesting to see. And I think we, as a species, I don't think this is just women. I just think as a species, humans are stuck a lot of times in a comparison loop that they can't get out of. And I think I've mentioned this on the show before, is I remember one time I was on the elliptical at the gym and I was looking at the woman's butt in front of me thinking, oh man, if I only had that butt, I could rule the world. Man, what a butt. That's what I'm aiming toward, is that butt. And I looked from her butt to her face, and I noticed that she was looking at the butt of the woman in front of her. And I thought, oh, interesting. She's probably having the same thoughts I'm having about her. She's having about the woman in front of her. And that's this vicious, and I'm sure everybody does it. It's this vicious cycle of comparison.
Yeah.
The death of us.
Yeah. Well, what's so fascinating about that level of comparison is, the work that I do is all about beauty. And whether I was a stylist or a designer or interior designer, I deal with beauty all the time. And now I teach about beauty. And what's interesting is that cancer introduced me to my beauty, Susan. I didn't feel truly beautiful until after I was initiated to the darkest parts of me. And so forget about trying to fit in. Forget about that. It was about self-acceptance. And I have a story for you. And it has to do with the Japanese tradition of kintsugi. And the idea, the metaphor is that, this hundreds of years of being able to take broken pottery and put it back together instead of throwing it away, but putting value back into it by highlighting those cracks with gold or silver, but to gild those cracks. And I find it's such a beautiful metaphor because that gold is your self-acceptance. All your scars, your trials, your tribulations, your heartbreaks, your disappointments, your despair, all of those things are your gold. And I think as a society, we hide it away. We're ashamed. There's a stigma. And there's definitely a stigma with cancer. There's definitely a stigma with, oh my gosh, it happens to other people. It doesn't happen to me. And so this idea of the scarlet letter and then feeling like, oh, and I had friends who they were allergic to, it's almost as if they were going to catch cooties or something. Like they were like, I can't be around that. People don't know how to deal with it. Some people can't handle. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to be. And that to me is interesting because I grew up in a culture that embraced the jiggle, that embraced all those parts of us and said, hey, this is welcome. And also the elderly, where they're no longer rendered invisible and put away in homes, but were very much venerated and taken care of. I learned how to braid hair on my great-grandmother's hair. So I remember the smell of her talcum powder. I remember the smell of her room. Like, she had this, exalted position in the family, and everybody came around her, and we learned from her. And I learned from my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my aunties, which, by the way, were between 21 and 12 when I was born. So they were like big sisters too. It was a fun time. It was a really fun time.
It's my understanding that you were diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yes.
For someone who has spent a lifetime in beauty and understanding what beauty standards are, and to have cancer attack one of the most feminine parts of you, how did you wrap your head around that? And how did your family, who venerated the women and lifted the women up in their chamber, as I liken it to the chamber, because I think what happens in many families is it is a safety ball of the men, do the men thing, and the women do the women thing. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
So when something like that happens, how do you talk about it? How does the family rally around? How do you rally around yourself as a woman?
That's a great question. Interestingly enough, I did not share my diagnosis that fast. My aunt, my mom's younger sister, had passed away from the same diagnosis the summer prior before mine, and it devastated us. Just death. And I was really scared to tell my own mother, because I thought this would just total her. And she rose to the occasion. But we decided to keep this very private. And, at the time, I had my own firm. I thought, I'm a single mom. Who's going to hire a sick woman? Like, I was very self-protective, and I didn't tell many people at all. As a matter of fact, Susan, I deprived myself of the support. Looking back, I see that I deprived myself of that support, where I see other people rallying around and, making food and, doing all those types of things. And I did everything on my own. My mom flew in each time for my chemo, for my surgery. Like, she would come in, but for the most part, I was alone. And that was hard. And I think because I went from one swing of the pendulum, I decided to write about my story and share it with the world. And basically, it was my way of healing myself. And when my family did find out, of course, they rallied around. They couldn't believe it. And they just are so supportive and so loving. But it's scary. And frankly, it's a taboo body part. It's a taboo body part. People don't want to talk about it. It's something that on a cultural level, it's very hard because there's a lot of stigma attached to it. And yes, how did I find my beauty while going through breast cancer? By rooting into what beauty meant for me. And it wasn't external, because I didn't look so great. I mean, swollen face from the steroids, hair falling out, burns, all this transformation. But if you think about a butterfly, you become this mushy caterpillar and you go into your chrysalis. So I went into my chrysalis during cancer, and then I rooted into my beauty then. I really figured out that my beauty existed no matter what. Whether I had hair or didn't have hair. Whether I had a partner or I didn't have a partner. My womanhood was self-defined. And it was not external, it was internal. And one of the things that I did do was go back to something from my childhood. The goddess Persephone is so interesting. I found her when I was 9 years old, and I started sketching my latest fashion on a goddess, and I would put it in a frame on my desk and change the the frame, the picture out every week with a new goddess and a new design. And Persephone was somebody I just really loved. Don't ask me how, but I ended up doing dress designs that were inspired by Persephone's descent into the underworld. And I divided the collection between Meadow, when she was like collecting crocuses and lilies and hyacinths. And then when she goes down into Hades, and that's like rich jewel tones like lapis and rubies and emeralds and deep, deep colors. And this idea of that light and dark, innocent and initiated, right? Love and pain, right? Despair and joy, all of those kind of things are within us. And I think when I was going through cancer, I realized I had become Persephone.
That's beautiful. Did you have a sense when you were diagnosed, did you know on a molecular level that you were going to be okay?
I made a decision. My son was 9 years old. I just made a decision that it was going to be okay, that I would be around for him. And I just accepted nothing less. And I want to mention, the typical drama triangle where, woe is me, I'm the victim, the doctor's my hero, my savior, and the cancer is the villain. That level of drama triangle, I divested myself from. I was the hero. I was co-creating my healing with my doctor team, which I love my team. I'm still friends with everyone. They're awesome. And I'm not against allopathic medicine. What I am is for creating a bridge between the ancient wisdom that I grew up with and the modern medicine that I also availed myself of. So bringing those two things together, I realized that I had the ability to change. And here's the key, and this is very important for anyone listening to this. Most cancers, over 2/3 of cancers, are epigenetic, which means they are the result of your lifestyle and your environment. So when my test came back negative for a genetic marker, I went, wait a second, why is that? I just didn't take it and just accept, okay, cancer happens, bad things happen to good people. Oh, well, no, I started investigating. I thought, okay, what causes this? What can cause this? I was in a toxic relationship. I was, I had Teflon pans. I started auditing my home. I started looking around. I'm a materials consultant for architectural firms anyway. So now I started looking at the materials in my home through the lens of cancer, through the lens of illness. I got my certification in quantum biology and circadian rhythm. I'm now looking at and assessing spaces through the lens of your health on every single level and bringing in design from a soul level. So bringing again all those threads together to create a beautiful tapestry. When you do that, when you mix colors, I know you're a painter, when you're mixing those colors, you arrive at this beautiful color that you didn't even realize existed. But until you do, you won't know. So I encourage everyone to really be curious and just explore, because the answers are there.
I do want to talk about the home that we place ourselves in. I want to first finish up on this other question. Your son, 9 years old, son, correct?
Yes,
son, 9 years old. How do you have, as a mom, how do you have that conversation with a child? I think a lot of people would love to hear how you went about talking to him about your diagnosis.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually a part of my book, is how to be a parent during cancer, right? And I took him to the Peggy Rockefeller Rose Garden on Lilac Hill in the Bronx Botanical Gardens. It's our happy place. We've been going there since he was in a baby carrier. We always picnic over there, and I set the blanket down, but he knew immediately from my face that I was serious. And I was honest with him. I told him, I said the C word. And the reason why is because it's so much better for us to frame this thing that's happening for them than to hear it from somebody else. Number one. Number two, it showed him that I was in control of my fate and that I was going to handle it. And he was watching my face. He was watching my expression. And I told him, and I was wearing my grandmother's ring. I'm not wearing it now. I was wearing my grandmother's ring and had a little diamond in it. And I said, Mama's body's like a garden, like this garden that's beautiful. And it's a very fertile garden. And sometimes some weeds grow in that garden. And there's a little weed, and we have to just prune it out. We prune things in our garden. And so he asked me, he said, how big is it? And so I pointed to so he's very visual like me. I pointed to the diamond and I said, it's a tiny little piece like this. And he said, okay, you're strong, Mama. You're strong. And he had so much wisdom, Susan. And throughout this, he was a part of the process. When I finished my radiation, it was a holiday. It was Veterans Day. And I asked them, I'm like, oh my God, I don't have childcare. What can I do? And they're like, bring him in. He can hang out in the office space. And, there was the head radiologist. She was a mom. So she's like, bring him over. So we brought in cupcakes and goodies for everyone for the last day and a card and everything. So it's very celebratory. So, everyone in the waiting room was like, wait, what's he doing here? Because everyone is like, and described this in my book. But, oh my God, Susan, we walked in and they embraced him and they took him into that room where I was getting treatment and showed him and gave him a tour. But then one of the technicians gave him the control and said, okay, here, press this button. You can see this move. And so he was able to see it move and adjust. And I saw his eyes light up. And I thought to myself, this is that seminal memory for him, the way those seminal memories were for me in my grandmother's garden, right? And think about it. He may grow up to invent something or to help ameliorate someone going through cancer or any other illness because he sees that he has agency. Even at his age, he's a part of that story of renewal, of rebirth, and revivification. So I think it's important to involve your children and obviously frame things in a way that they can palate, right? But I do believe that they have the ability to give us so much wisdom and so much grace and allow us to heal even better than without their knowledge.
I agree with you completely. Children are incredibly empathic and perceptive and intelligent. They're thinkers and they know how to think beyond the box. They haven't lost that yet, that imagination yet. It's lovely. I'm glad that you included him in your journey. And you're cancer-free now?
Yes, thank you.
Lovely. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Let's talk about the home.
Your home is your living ecosystem, just like your body. So there's a communication that's happening between your cells, which are divinely intelligent, and your home, which is quite alive. And from a practical point of view, the materials that we ingest, I'm not even talking about food. It's what we breathe, the nanoparticles of dust in our air, right? Or the volatile organic compounds that are being released from your synthetic carpets. I did a reel recently where I'm like, your body is a solar panel. We are solar panels. We have photoreceptors all over our body and not just in our eyes. And we are able to still be in touch with the light spectrum. And as modern as we try to be and as, this modern lifestyle that is literally killing us, it tries to make things so much more convenient. We are inexorably tied to our biology for millennia. And for millennia, the sun was our clock. And we ourselves have a clock. And so this idea, if you start looking at cancers and all the precipitating factors of cancers, a lot of them are the result of circadian disruption. And what that means is getting the wrong light at the wrong time. So from a designer's perspective, how can I design windows that let more light in? Because a lot of the windows have laminations that prevent vital UV portion of the spectrum to go in to save energy. But a lot of things that are marketed to save your environment are actually killing your body.
Interesting.
Yeah. So looking at your home from a practical standpoint of what you can remove, what things are toxic, and then what you can add to enhance your health is something I'm utterly obsessed with.
What do you find is some of the biggest mistakes people make in their homes? Aside from, we all know Teflon, not great. It causes brain damage, brain Alzheimer's, things like that, a whole host of things, and endocrine disruptors, candles, smelly candles, certainly. What other sorts of things do you see?
The hidden killer in most homes is your carpet. And here's why. Synthetic carpet, or anything that's touted as washable, pet-friendly, stain-resistant, is code for bad for your body. And most people don't realize that synthetic, I'm talking polypropylene, nylon, viscose, all of those materials, they release VOCs. But not only that, the dust that you're breathing in your home, carpets are emitting nanoparticles that you are literally eating. And that is really toxic. So number one, carpets should be wool, biosustainable. It's been around. And guys, it's so cleanable. Don't be afraid of wool. Don't be afraid of jute, cotton, linen, or simple flat weaves. I mean, you don't have to go crazy and it doesn't have to be expensive. What you pay for it with your health is far more costly than that initial outlay from your pocketbook. So that's one. And the other, as I mentioned, light. Now, opening your windows is good for two basic reasons. One, sunlight is not polarized. So I use designers' tricks to be able to bounce the sunlight into a space. And since you can open your window, you're actually able to absorb that light spectrum that starts your circadian cascade, which keeps all of your other systems functioning. Number one. Number two, air circulation. I call, these spaces, especially during winter, sarcophagi, because it's like you're encapsulated in this recycle situation, which is so toxic. Indoor air is far more polluted than outdoor air. So to open your window, you're getting the added benefit of releasing those VOCs, getting that fresh air inside, and that light on your skin. It's a win-win.
Mm-hmm. What about plants?
Oh, you found my favorite subject. How did you know?
I'm a plant whore.
Oh my God, I gotta see. We have to have a whole other conversation. Yes. I have a list. NASA has a list of the top 20 air filtering plants. I mean, they've been doing this for millions of years. They're way better at it than we are. But I actually went through my own list of what goes in what room and why you need some in your bedroom and which ones are good, especially in different light locations, which are good in that airless office that has no windows and things like that. Biophilia is the science of nature and its effect on your biology. And I'm a designer who practices biophilic spaces and uses biophilia to enhance your health and your vitality. And I just want to express beauty, real beauty, how I define it, is cellular alignment. It's your divine design. Your body actually wants to heal and wants to go into that homeostasis. We are the ones who F it up. So I have to kind of step back and say, nature is intrinsically linked to our biology and therefore our beauty. And it's beautiful on its own. You know, when you look at leaves, you actually affect your brainwaves. There's a neurological effect on you when you look at leaves. And if you think about it, does nature have right angles, Susan? Have you seen like nature's, are there like total perfect squares in nature? Not really. Maybe some crystals, maybe some, I'll give some crystals that do that. But for the most part, it's all curves. It's all curves. And there is something that happens to your eyes when you're able to focus on the multiplicity of those leaves and those curves that affects you. And it brings you into your parasympathetic state. So why not? And I want to add, during the pandemic, there were studies that were done, you know, this epidemic of loneliness, right? People are so isolated. Taking care of plants helped alleviate anxiety and depression as well. So I think it's a win-win.
I talk to my plants every day, and at night, I'll reach up and shake one of its leaves and say goodnight, which is, people might think that's crazy, but I swear they know when I'm leaving town, and they look to me, they feel excited when I come home, and people think I'm a little off, but
I love the fact that you're touching your plants. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, we're buddies.
That's great. When I introduce a new specimen into the family, I'm always talking like, hello, welcome to your new home. And these are your sisters and these are your brothers. Yes. And like, basically like, you know, and they're a community. They have their place. They know who they're with, what's next to them. Grounding is really important. The reason why is modern life, Wi-Fi, and our electrified life in general robs us of our electrons. So in order to, again, keep our electrical body in harmony, grounding is so important. So bare feet on the ground. If it's 50 degrees, if it's like 15 degrees, 50 degrees, you can handle. I can definitely handle barefoot. But if it's too cold for you and you're wearing shoes outside, touching a tree, which I always do anyway. Did you know, like tree hugging a tree, touching a tree with your bare skin helps ground you because its roots are grounded and it conducts that electrical charge to you.
I'm gonna sound even weirder. Firstly, I am a big tree hugger. I grew up climbing trees. I love trees. I think they're incredible. I like to touch their bark. I say hello to them. I have trees in my neighborhood that, you know, I'll run and show people visiting, this is my favorite tree. Look at this tree. Look at that tree. But I have come upon trees. I always ask permission before I hug them. I say, may I hug you? And there was one tree. Usually they're fine with it. I know that sounds so crazy, but I had one tree once, was not having it, did not want to be hugged or touched. And I said, okay, I appreciate that. I'm not going to do that.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
But it was so visceral. I felt it that this tree does not want to be hugged.
Wow.
Isn't that weird? It's so weird, but I swear it was very real.
Do you know what's so interesting? We define intelligence based on ourselves, which is so crazy and subjective. You know, The Secret Life of Trees, that book, I mean, there's mycelium and all the mycelial networks and how these trees take care of each other and communicate, you know, through that underground network. It's like, oh, they were smart all along. No, we were the dumb ones. They've always been doing this for millions of years. We're the ones who are finally figuring their language out. Yeah. You know, we're late to the game. Like, we're really late to the game. So I think I love hearing you say that because you're trusting your intuition, Susan. You're trusting what you're feeling. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in being able to trust your wisdom and that I call it your inner GPS, because for so long I overrode that inner GPS, which I do believe led to my cancer. And I think now I'm much more careful and rooted into. And sometimes those are small, little, tiny whispers. They're not loud. You have to kind of quiet your mind in order to listen to that. Mm-hmm. But if you build that practice into your life, designing an authentic life, designing a life where you're experiencing beauty every single day, you're experiencing the sacredness of life every single day, and creating these rituals. I call them my rituals of reverence. When you do that, then that's your paradise.
I love that. Have you seen those YouTube videos of the people that attach the little wires to plants and they play music and mushrooms and all that? Oh, is that not the coolest?
Of course. Oh, yes. Yes. And, they also respond to music. It's documented that classical music helps them grow. There is so much wisdom to the kind of life we live in. I design using my 5 senses. And I think, it's counterintuitive when you're going through an illness. Most people think of wanting to escape. But for me, it was actually bringing myself into my body and rooting down into my senses. And so by designing rituals and designing spaces using my senses to layer in music, to layer in touch, the way you touch that leaf, to layer in sight, to see something that makes you happy and makes you feel centered. It's so important to curate, to what I call declutter. Yes, we can declutter, but to curate your spaces. I consider every tabletop your altar. Your coffee table is your altar. Your dresser is your altar. Your end table is your altar. What you place there should have reverence for you, and only things that are sacred and give you joy, whatever those things are. So to create a home that is your living sanctuary. Now, what does that even look like? If you follow, what do I like to smell? What do I like to taste? What do I like to touch against my skin? What do I like to look at? What colors give me joy? And a lot of times, I have clients who are too scared to pick the color that I could see they really like it, but they're like, oh, I don't know if I can make that big of a commitment. A pillow on your sofa is like that scarf on your little black dress. You can change the accessory. You can even, and I just did a workshop today with other cancer survivors. And I said, even if you want to shop in your house and you don't want to buy a pillow cover, take a scarf from your closet, some scarf that feels good, silk, mohair, whatever it is that really feels great, and wrap your pillow in it. Have that color, have that ability to create. People feel like they have to stay in the waiting room of life, the purgatory, right? Of like not investing in art or not putting a hole in the wall because it's a rental. Why should I invest? Because I don't own it. Well, guess what? You own your day. That's the only thing you truly own. You're not taking anything with you. So that day that you can create that paradise, that's why you should create that paradise and own that paradise. And that's why I have my course called Claim Your Paradise, because cancer made me realize there may be no tomorrow.
Right. Well, there isn't. We never get to tomorrow. It doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah. I wrote in my book, whoever wrote "Good things come to those who wait" was a master manipulator.
Let's talk about the book.
Sure. When I made the commitment to write my book, Purgatory to Paradise, How Cancer Helped Me Design an Authentic Life. And I basically decided spring of 2022 to write it. And I knew my birthday that fall was coming up. And I said, that's it. That's my deadline. It's going to be published. That's it. And I reverse engineered everything. And the book that I wanted to write, Purgatory to Paradise, is basically an entree into these subjects that I will write a little bit more and expound a little bit more on tomorrow. No, in the future. But It's about setting the stage of bringing all these threads together: mythology, science, heartbreak, right? Epigenetics, illness, motherhood, culture. I mean, it was crazy because it hit number one in health and spirituality, women in Islam, sacred sexuality, neuropsychology, Pakistan history, and I'm forgetting a few others. But it was like paint and wall covering, because that's who I am. I'm all these things, that we are all these things, right? Why pick one? So it's the idea of being that bridge builder and creating, really putting my heart out there and saying, this is my story. This is it. This is my truth. And this is how I make sense of what happened to me. And hopefully it can be your survival guide.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the hiccups along the way of being so honest with yourself and seeing yourself through the lens of an author?
What's interesting, this has been a very interesting result, is since I published, not everyone's happy for me.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it triggered a lot of people. Like, those who know me know exactly what I was talking about. And I really did put everything out there, and including vulnerable parts of my cancer journey, which isn't easy. And certainly I have friends who went through the same breast cancer diagnosis who don't tell anybody about it. It's part of the past. That door's shut. No one needs to know. And not that it's my identity. It was my way of coping and healing. And what I learned along the way, Susan, I'm like, I can't keep this to myself. How am I going to just continue doing the same old, same old? Yeah, I can make your living room look really great. But is it good for you? What else? Let's create something different here. And I really, truly believe that everyone deserves beauty, especially when you're going through something as catastrophic as cancer or any illness or any chronic illness. That's when you need beauty the most. And I believe that beauty is a very powerful healing modality. The kind of beauty that I'm talking about, that cellular alignment, that ability to create it. And, this newfangled word, neuroaesthetics, which is great, oh yeah, art makes you happy and it's a good thing for your body. Sure. It's been around for a while. Let's validate some of this intuition that we've had. So like art, neuroaesthetics, the idea that beauty has a physiological and a psychological effect on you, has been documented. And I believe we need to employ it in pragmatic ways. And you don't need $1 million budget to create that beauty, that healing oasis in your home. You just need education.
I stuck a yam in my windowsill in my kitchen. It's exploding with plant life. It's so wonderful. And I've been documenting it on my Instagram stories, and people are like, oh my God, they're following along. The littlest thing, stick some sticks, put it in a jar, water it daily, watch it explode with leaves and personality. That brings joy. If something so little as a window yam can do that.
I love it. I think being a gardener, that's my church. That's really where I pray. Gardening is my prayer. And I realize in that regard, there is a greater force than me at play when I watch something unfurl and bloom, and just out of these tiny little seeds, a life erupts. And I love using the gardening analogy, even in terms of our lives, because death and decay are teeming with life. And all that life, that organic matter that we're growing in, if we can dig our hands into that soil and accept that soil and love that soil, then we can accept the deepest, darkest part of ourselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is gardening. These conversations plant seeds in others.
Yes, I love that. Oh my God. I love talking with you. This is great.
Tell people, I love talking with you as well. Tell everybody where they might find you and your work and all the things.
Thank you. ClaimYourParadise.com. You can see a lot of things there. And for your listeners, I have a gift. It is my top 3 things you can have today that I have vetted, and I explain the scientific reasons why. And that's at claimyourparadise.com/podcast, where you can download that today. And you can find me on Instagram at Mahwish_Syed_designs.
And that's Mahwish.
Yes, Syed designs.
Syed. Yes,
yeah.
Yes. It's been so lovely speaking with you.
Likewise.
I'm so glad you're out there doing your thing. And I think it's so important to have these conversations because many of us run around on autopilot, or even when we are incredibly present, we can slip back into old patterns. And these sorts of conversations are such a lovely reminder that it's not just about what we ourselves do, but in everything that we surround ourselves with as well. The things we put in our body visually, through our mouths, through our nose, through our ears. It's all a part of it, through our feet when we walk on the grass, all of it.
Yes. I love that. Exactly. We speak the same language. So nice to meet you. So nice to know you.
It's so lovely to meet and know you as well. Congrats on being cancer-free. I know that that's one hell of a journey. So, and you said it yourself, although if you hadn't, I would have, about that we all have to go through these dark, and not just one in our lifetime, but so many dark nights of the soul. And, we have to go to the underworld. It's a requirement, I think, to live this life. And I think a lot of people are afraid of the underworld, understandably, but it's such an incredibly important part of our being and our shadow. Everything wants to be heard, even the darkest depths of ourselves,
Exactly. I tell my son, the boogeyman is scarier when you can't see him.
I agree. And even the boogeyman just wants to have a conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're so wise. Love it.
Well, you too. All right. Take care. Have a lovely day. And thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And thank you for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.